to etc., you would use the bigger bonus, which is your favored bonus. So whenever a skill is favored, you use the favored attribute bonus, not the base bonus. So you get a bigger bonus, essentially, whenever it's a favored skill. It's something you're slightly better at than your other skills. And you see that in my bow skill, I have 3 boxes. So whenever I'm making a base attack with my bow, I'm going to roll 3 6-sided dice and the feat die for my attack. Okay? And to be successful, depending on what stance I'm in, since it's a bow, I'm definitely going to be in rearward stance. That's the only stance you can shoot a bow from. The target number in rearward stance is 12 plus the parry rating of the creature. And if they have a shield, that gives another bonus. So let's say I'm fighting, I don't know, an orc. And an orc has, it's going to be TN 12 to hit it because I'm in rearward stance. And let's say that the orc has a parry rating of 7. So 7 plus 12 is 19. So I need a 19 or better to hit the troll. So I'm going to roll the feat die and my 3 dice, which are my 3 success dice, which are equal to my skill with a bow, and see if I can actually hit the troll. Okay? And sorry about having to move the camera, but I'm actually going to make a roll and see if I can hit. So as I roll the dice here, you see I made a 10, a 3, a 3, and a 4. So I made 20. And I only needed an 18 to hit, so I would have been successful. Sorry, moving the camera again. I would have hit the troll, the orc, I'm sorry. So that would have been a successful hit. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the stats of your weapon. And you'll notice that there's a stat called edge. And this is my weapon stats for my bow. And here's my edge rating, okay? So my bow has an edge rating of 10. What that means is anytime I roll a 10 or more on the feat die, the 12-sided die, that means I could have wounded that creature. And I rolled a 10. That's exactly what I needed to on my edge. So that means I have potentially wounded that troll. I'm sorry, I keep saying troll. I've got troll in the brain for some reason. That orc. So if I would have, as I made my edge result, that means I potentially have wounded that orc. So now that orc is going to have to roll the feat die and a number of 6-sided success dice, oops, I'm dropping these here, equal to his protection rating. Protection is the rating you get from the armor that you're wearing. So any kind of armor that you wear tell you how many dice to roll for a protection roll, and if you're wearing a full helm or like a small helm, that'll give you a static number bonus to your protection roll. So that orc is going to roll a protection roll, and if the orc is successful, he will not take a wound. If he fails, he will take a wound. Okay? And when an enemy takes a wound, as soon as they take 1 wound, they go down. Unless they have a special trait or something that says they can take 2 wounds, like a player character can take 2 wounds before going down. So if the orc would fail his roll, he would go down with 1 wound. If he makes the roll, though, he does not suffer a wound. And the target number that orc is going to have to equal or exceed on his protection roll is also determined by the weapon that I used. As you can see here, there is a rating on the weapon called injury. And you can see I have an injury of 14. And what that means is that orc is going to have to equal or exceed 14 in order to be successful on his protection roll and protect against the potential wound that I just caused him. Otherwise, if he protects against the wound, he's still going to lose a number of endurance points instead of taking a wound, because there's wounds and then there's endurance loss. Endurance points are basically like hit points. And as you can see, my weapon does 5 points of endurance damage. Okay? So even if he protects against the wound and doesn't take a wound, he would still take the 5 points of endurance loss. So there's endurance and then there's wounds. And as I said, when a creature that you're fighting gets hit, if they protect against the damage, if they protect against taking a wound, they're still going to take the endurance loss. Okay? But if they fail their protection roll, they're also going to take the wound. Okay? Now, player characters can take up to 2 wounds. The first wound, when you suffer the first wound, it has no effect on your overall performance. When you suffer that second wound, you go unconscious. Now, vice versa, if your endurance level gets to 0, you go unconscious as well. And remember, your endurance is also being affected by how much fatigue you have. So as you take endurance damage, this endurance number is going to get smaller, and you never want it to equal this fatigue number. If your endurance ever equals your fatigue, you become weary, and that means that every time you roll the 6-sided success dice, any number that's not shaded in will count as a 0. The 1s, 2s, and 3s. But the ones that are shaded in, you still count. So it essentially makes you less effective in combat when you're weary. Okay, so if your endurance score goes to 0, you go unconscious. If you suffer 2 wounds, you go unconscious as a player hero. Now, if you ever suffer your 2nd wound in combat, and you get your endurance down to 0 during that same hit, so if your endurance goes to 0 and you suffer your 2nd wound on that same hit, you not only go down, but you die. So when your endurance goes to 0 and you suffer your 2nd wound at the same time, you will die. Otherwise, you're just considered to be unconscious and you're possibly dying. And if you're dying, basically, any time that you receive 1 endurance point of healing, of positive healing, as soon as you get 1 endurance point back, you're back up and conscious again. So that's the way that works. And then depending on if your wounds are treated or not by basically like medical checks basically in the game, if the wound is treated, you will heal slightly faster than if it's not treated. And the healing in the game is very appropriate to the Middle-earth setting and things like that as well. Now, the game does allow for brawling attacks and for throwing attacks as well. And when you make a brawling or a throwing attack, you just use the dagger skill. So you roll your dagger skill to make a brawling attack or to make a throwing attack. And for brawling, it just causes 1 endurance points worth of damage on a successful roll. And then you do additional harm equal to the attacker's damage rating on a great or extraordinary success. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier is each character has a built-in damage bonus that's determined when you first roll the character. And that damage bonus, when you roll a great success on an attack, remember that's when you roll a 6 on your success die, the Tangwar symbol, you get to add your damage bonus as a bonus to that attack roll. If you roll 2 Tangwar symbols, which remember is called an extraordinary success on your attack roll, you get to add your damage bonus twice, essentially. So you do, it's basically kind of like rolling a crit in a way. You do extra damage. And that's basically how attacks work. And it's a pretty simple system. And I'd have to say, just kind of, I know I kind of called this a review of the game as well. But overall, the game is a wonderful, wonderful game. The system is very simple. It may not sound simple because I'm not great at explaining it, but it's a pretty simple system. Everything in the system works very easy and very logically. And what I really love the most about the game is that all the themes of the game are based on the actual themes of Tolkien's works. So you have things like heart, hope, fellowship points, corruption, the shadow. All these are actual mechanics in the game that really mimic the themes that Tolkien wrote about in the books and that you see in The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. Overall, I'd have to say The One Ring is the best Tolkien RPG I've ever played. It's the best Middle-earth game I've seen yet. I own, and I don't know if you probably can't see it from here, but on my top shelf here, I own all the other Middle-earth RPGs that have been made. I have Middle-earth Role-Playing 2nd Edition up there, and I have Decipher's Lord of the Rings RPG. None of those games capture the actual spirit, the essence of Middle-earth and Tolkien's writings the way that this game does. This is the best RPG I've seen yet for The Lord of the Rings. So if you're a big fan of Tolkien, you're a big fan of The Lord of the Rings and or The Hobbit or the Silmarillion for that matter, even though this game doesn't really cover the first age or the second age of Middle-earth or the fourth age. It's a third age game. But if you're a fan of those works and you're a fan of the spirit of Tolkien, I couldn't recommend this product enough. It's one of the best games I've ever seen. And if you do want to play in the first age or the second age or even the fourth age, even though this game covers the third age of Middle-earth, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of supplements that are going to be created by players out there, fan-created things to expand the game, expand the races, you know, like Numenorians, things of that nature. The Noldor elves will be added by fans, I'm sure, to be able to expand the game into other eras. The way the game's created, the simple mechanics of the game, it would not be difficult to mod the game to be able to cover any era of Middle-earth, really. Not hard at all. And some fans have even put out rules on how you can create your own cultures and your own callings. And remember, callings are like classes in this game. So it's not hard to mod the game to cover any part of the Middle-earth setting you may want to cover, or any age of Middle-earth. So overall, I give the game a 2 big thumbs up. The best Tolkien Lord of the Rings RPG ever created. Can't recommend it enough. Go out and get it. This is my time, and thanks for watching.